I am 81 years old, and I finally understand that peace does not always come from bringing people closer. Sometimes peace begins when you step back. Not because you hate anyone, not because you have stopped caring, but because you have finally accepted that some people can only love you from a distance without damaging your heart. For most of my life, I believed every strained relationship had to be repaired. If someone became distant, I chased the conversation. If a family member misunderstood me, I explained myself again. If a friend repeatedly disappointed me, I searched for another reason to forgive. I thought distance meant failure. I thought a good person kept the door open, no matter how many times someone entered carrying chaos. But every open door has a cost. Some people entered my life and left me feeling calm, respected, and understood. Others entered and disturbed something inside me that took days to settle. They brought criticism into my home. They brought old arguments into new conversations. They brought demands disguised as affection. Then they returned to their own lives while I remained alone with the tension they had created. Peace becomes more valuable when your energy becomes limited. At 30, I could argue all evening and still wake up ready for work. At 50, I began noticing the emotional cost. By 81, I understood that one unpleasant conversation could disturb my sleep, my appetite, and the quiet rhythm of several days. Time changes the value of peace. When you begin to understand that the years ahead may be fewer than the years behind, you become more careful about who receives access to your mind. Old age teaches you quietly. It teaches you that not every relationship needs more effort. Some relationships need less access. The first lesson I learned was that distance allows you to see patterns that closeness can hide. When you are deeply involved in a relationship, you often react to each event separately. One argument seems like a bad day. One broken promise seems like an accident. One cruel remark seems like something spoken in anger. You forgive the moment without noticing the pattern. I did this for years. There was someone who apologized beautifully. After every disagreement, they knew exactly what to say. They told me they had been under pressure. They said they did not mean to hurt me. They promised the next conversation would be different. I wanted to believe them, and because I stayed close, the apology felt more important than the behavior. But when I finally stepped back, I saw the full picture. The words changed. The pattern did not. They still raised their voice when I disagreed. They still ignored my boundaries. They still expected forgiveness before taking responsibility. Distance gave me a view that closeness had denied me. When you stop rushing to repair everything, you begin noticing what happens without your effort. Does the other person reflect? Do they change? Do they return with respect? Or do they simply wait until you feel guilty enough to reopen the door? This is where many of us make the mistake. We judge relationships by promises instead of patterns. A promise can be spoken in 1 minute. A pattern is built over months and years. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Distance does not always destroy a relationship. Sometimes it reveals what the relationship truly was. The second lesson was that distance protects you from reacting while wounded. I used to believe every problem had to be discussed immediately. If someone hurt me, I wanted an answer. If I felt misunderstood, I wanted to explain. If a family member accused me unfairly, I wanted to correct the story before another hour passed. But wounded people rarely speak with wisdom. Pain makes the voice sharper. Pride makes the memory selective. Fear makes every disagreement feel larger than it is. There were conversations I wish I had delayed. I said things that were true but unnecessary. I brought up old failures because I wanted the other person to feel the pain they had caused me. For a moment it felt powerful. Later it felt heavy. Words spoken in anger do not disappear when the anger ends. They remain in families for years. They are repeated at gatherings. They become part of how people remember one another. I learned to create distance before responding. Sometimes that distance was 1 evening. Sometimes it was several days. I would say, I need time before we continue this conversation. At first, people accused me of avoiding the issue, but I was not avoiding it. I was preventing my pain from becoming another wound. Distance gave me time to ask better questions. What exactly hurt me? Do I need an apology, a boundary, or simply acceptance? Will this conversation create understanding, or are we both trying to win? What part of this problem belongs to me? Not every pause is punishment. A healthy pause can be mercy. It protects the relationship from words that cannot be retrieved. It protects your dignity from the temporary satisfaction of a cruel reply. Sometimes the wisest response is not silence forever. It is silence until your heart becomes calm enough to speak honestly. The third lesson was painful because it involved family. I learned that love and closeness are not always the same thing. We are taught that family should remain close no matter what happens. Parents should always forgive. Siblings should always stay connected. Grandparents should always keep the door open. There is beauty in family loyalty, but loyalty can become harmful when it requires one person to tolerate everything. Some people love you, but they do not know how to protect your heart. A family member may care deeply about you and still speak to you disrespectfully. They may love you and still pressure you for money. They may worry about you and still try to control decisions that belong to you. Their love may be real, so may the damage. For years I believed that recognizing the damage meant denying the love. That is why I stayed too close to certain people. I told myself, they are family, as though those 3 words could make every wound acceptable. There came a time when one family relationship became a constant source of tension. Every call turned into criticism. Every visit included questions about private matters. Every boundary was treated as rejection. I tried explaining. I tried being patient. I tried giving more. Nothing improved. Finally, I reduced contact. I did not cut the person off completely. I simply stopped making myself available for every conversation. I shortened the calls. I refused to discuss certain subjects. I invited them less often into my home. They said I had become distant. They were right. Distance was the only way I could keep love from turning into resentment. Sometimes love survives better with space around it. You may care about someone deeply and still need limits. You may wish them well without giving them access to every part of your life. You may forgive them while choosing not to return to the same level of closeness. Distance does not always mean the love is gone. Sometimes it means you are trying to save what remains of it. The fourth lesson was that distance protects privacy. Privacy is not bitterness, it is wisdom. I once believed closeness required complete openness. I shared my plans, worries, finances, disappointments, and family problems with people I trusted. But trust should not be given only because someone has known you for a long time. It should be based on how they handle what you reveal. Some people use personal information to understand you. Others use it to advise, pressure, judge, or gossip about you. I learned this slowly. I would share a concern with one person, then hear it repeated by another. I would mention a decision I was considering, and suddenly several relatives had opinions about it. I would admit feeling lonely, and someone would use that loneliness to pressure me into accepting behavior I normally would not tolerate. When too many people know the details of your life, too many voices begin living inside your mind. You stop hearing your own judgment. You begin asking what everyone else will think. You make decisions not from peace, but from the fear of criticism. Distance helped me become private again. I stopped announcing plans before they were settled. I stopped explaining every financial choice. I stopped sharing my deepest pain with people who treated vulnerability like conversation material. Now I choose carefully. I may speak honestly with one trustworthy person, but I do not hand my private life to every friendly face. Not everyone needs to know what you are healing from. Not everyone needs access to your plans. Not everyone deserves an explanation for your choices. A protected life is often a quieter life. The less unnecessary information people have, the fewer opportunities they have to interfere. The older I get, the less I explain myself to people who only hear what they want. The fifth lesson was that distance separates compassion from responsibility. I have always felt other people's pain strongly. When someone was struggling, I wanted to help. When a relative was in trouble, I felt responsible for finding a solution. When a friend was unhappy, I carried their sadness home with me. Compassion is a beautiful quality, but compassion without distance can turn into emotional exhaustion. You begin living inside problems that do not belong to you. There was someone who called me regularly to discuss the same difficulty. I listened for hours. I offered advice. I worried. I replayed the conversation after it ended. But nothing changed because the person did not want to take the steps necessary to change it. They wanted relief, not responsibility. Each call transferred their emotional weight to me. They felt lighter. I felt heavier. I did not understand this until I was much older. Listening does not require carrying. You can care about someone without allowing their crisis to become the center of your day. You can say, "I am sorry you are going through this," without taking responsibility for fixing it. You can offer advice once without repeating it for years. You can end a conversation when it becomes emotionally harmful. I began creating distance in those calls. I listened, but not endlessly. I stopped solving every problem. I asked, "What do you think you will do?" That question returned responsibility to the person who owned it. Some people became uncomfortable with the change. They were used to leaving their emotional burden with me, but I could no longer sacrifice my peace to prove that I cared. Compassion says, "I see your pain." Self-abandonment says, "Your pain must now become mine." Wisdom knows the difference. The sixth lesson was that distance can break the habit of seeking approval. For much of my life, I wanted people to agree with me. I did not need everyone to praise me, but I wanted them to understand my reasons. If I made a decision, I explained it. If I said no, I gave a long list of reasons. If someone looked disappointed, I began questioning myself. I thought explaining would bring peace. Instead, it invited negotiation. I might say, "I cannot come because I am tired." The other person would answer, "You can rest tomorrow." I might say, "I am not comfortable lending money." They would say, "But you know I will repay you." I might say, "I need more time alone." They would ask, "What have we done wrong?" Every reason became something to challenge. Distance helped me stop asking permission for my own life. I began saying, "I have decided not to. I am not available. I would rather keep that private." These sentences felt harsh at first because I had spent a lifetime softening every boundary. But firmness is not cruelty. A boundary is not an attack. A decision is not a request for approval. The people who respected me adjusted. The people who benefited from my guilt became upset. That difference taught me a great deal. When you create distance from other people's reactions, you begin hearing your own conscience more clearly. You can ask, "Is this decision honest and fair?" If the answer is yes, you do not need a room full of agreement. Peace comes when you stop holding public debates about private choices. The seventh lesson was that distance can reveal who truly values you. When you stop calling first, organizing every visit, solving every problem, and keeping every relationship alive by force, some connections become quiet. That silence can be painful. It may confirm something you have been afraid to admit. Some relationships existed mainly because of your effort. You were the one who remembered birthdays. You arranged gatherings. You apologized first. You checked in. You kept the conversation moving. When you stepped back, nothing came towards you. I have felt that disappointment. There were people I thought would notice my absence immediately. Weeks passed. No call came. My first reaction was hurt. My second was anger. Then, slowly, I felt clarity. Distance did not make them forget me. It revealed how little effort they were already willing to make. But I also had to be careful. Silence should not become a secret test. People cannot always know what we need unless we tell them. There is nothing wrong with calling someone you love. There is nothing undignified about saying, "I miss you." The problem begins when you repeatedly chase people who consistently show no interest in meeting you halfway. Reach out honestly, invite once, express your need clearly. Then observe what happens. Do they make some effort? Do they ask about your life? Do they remember you when they need nothing? Do they respect your time and limits? Distance reveals whether people miss your presence or only your usefulness. That truth can hurt, but pain that brings clarity is often kinder than comfort built on illusion. One genuine relationship is worth more than many connections held together by fear. The final lesson was the deepest one. Distance creates the space where you can return to yourself. For years, my mind was crowded with other people, their expectations, their opinions, their needs, their disappointment. Even when they were not physically present, they occupied my thoughts. I imagined what they might say. I prepared explanations for conversations that had not happened. I worried about being misunderstood. I felt responsible for emotions that belonged to others. There was no room left for my own quiet voice. When I began stepping back, the silence felt uncomfortable. Without constant problems to solve, I did not know what to do with myself. Without other people's approval, I had to decide what I actually wanted. That sounds simple. It is not. Many of us spend decades in roles: parent, partner, provider, helper, peacekeeper, the responsible one, the patient one. Then old age asks a frightening question. Who are you when no one needs something from you? Distance allowed me to discover the answer slowly. I learned that I enjoyed quiet mornings without telephone calls. I liked eating without listening to complaints. I enjoyed making plans without announcing them. I discovered that a day could be meaningful even if no one else witnessed it. A quiet life is not an empty life. There is life in a cup of tea prepared carefully. There is life in sunlight across the floor. There is life in reading, walking, gardening, remembering, praying, listening to music, and speaking with one person who truly hears you. Distance removed noise. It did not remove meaning. But I also learned that healthy distance should not become a wall against everyone. Fear can disguise itself as peace. After being hurt, it is tempting to say, "I need no one." That is not wisdom. That is pain protecting itself. Human beings still need connection. We need trusted people who can enter our lives honestly. We need someone we can call when a day becomes too heavy. We need conversation, laughter, and care. The goal is not to become unreachable. The goal is to become selective. Not everyone belongs at the same distance. Some people deserve closeness because they have handled your heart with care. Some belong in your life, but not in your private decisions. Some can be loved through occasional contact. Some must remain outside the door because every return brings the same harm. Wisdom is not treating everyone equally. It is giving each person the access their behavior has earned. At 81, I no longer believe peace comes from repairing every broken relationship. Some things should be repaired. A misunderstanding between two sincere people deserves conversation. An apology followed by changed behavior deserves consideration. A loving relationship should not be abandoned simply because it becomes difficult. But not every relationship is difficult in the same way. Some relationships challenge you to grow. Others require you to shrink. Some disagreements lead to understanding. Others repeat because one person refuses responsibility. Some people respect your boundaries even when they dislike them. Others punish you for having boundaries at all. Learn the difference. Distance should never be used as a weapon. Do not withdraw affection to control someone. Do not use silence to create fear. Do not disappear simply because honest conversation feels uncomfortable. That is not peace. Peace is clear. Peace can say, "I care about you, but this relationship needs different boundaries." Peace can say, "I forgive you, but I cannot return to the same closeness." Peace can say, "I will speak with you when we can do so respectfully." Peace can close a door without slamming it. Sometimes dignity means walking away without proving your pain. You do not have to convince someone that they hurt you before you are allowed to protect yourself. You do not need their agreement to create distance. You do not need to make them the villain. You only need to be honest about what happens to your peace when they come too close. Notice how your body responds. Do you feel tension when their name appears on your telephone? Do you carefully rehearse every sentence because you fear their reaction? Do you feel relief when they cancel? Do you need hours or days to recover after seeing them? These feelings do not automatically mean someone is bad, but they may reveal that the current level of closeness is unhealthy. Distance can be practical and gentle. You can shorten conversations. You can meet in a public place instead of your home. You can stop discussing certain topics. You can answer later instead of immediately. You can decline visits when you need rest. You can reduce contact without making a grand announcement. Not every boundary needs a dramatic ending. Sometimes peace begins with a small change repeated consistently. At my age, I no longer want relationships that require constant recovery. I want people whose presence allows me to remain myself. I want conversations where disagreement does not become disrespect. I want family love that does not use guilt as a rope. I want friendship that can survive a boundary. I want closeness that leaves room to breathe. And when that kind of closeness is not possible, I accept distance. Not with hatred, not with revenge. With sadness sometimes, yes. Distance can bring grief. You may miss someone and still know they are not good for your peace. You may remember happy years and still accept that the relationship has changed. You may love the person they once were while protecting yourself from who they have become. Missing someone does not always mean you should bring them closer again. Loneliness can edit memory. It shows you the laughter and hides the disrespect. It shows you the good days and forgets the nights you could not sleep. When you feel tempted to reopen a harmful door, remember the whole relationship. Not only what you miss, remember what the closeness cost. At 81, I finally understand why peace requires distance. Distance from arguments that have no honest purpose. Distance from people who use guilt to gain control. Distance from those who listen only to judge. Distance from problems that belong to other adults. Distance from the need to be approved by everyone. Distance from old roles that required me to disappear. And sometimes, distance from the version of myself that believed love had to be earned through endless sacrifice. I still care deeply. I still forgive. I still welcome sincere people. But I no longer confuse an open heart with an unprotected life. My peace has a door now. It is not locked against everyone. But I decide when it opens. I decide who enters. I decide which conversations are allowed to remain. That is not bitterness. That is the wisdom of finally understanding that the heart needs both love and protection. Do not be ashamed if you need distance. Take enough space to hear your own thoughts. Take enough space to see patterns clearly. Take enough space to calm your pain before you speak. Take enough space to remember that your life belongs to you. The right people may not enjoy every boundary, but they will not demand that you destroy your peace to prove your love. At 81, I have stopped measuring love by closeness alone. Sometimes love sits beside you. Sometimes love calls from another town. Sometimes love wishes someone well from behind a necessary boundary. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is step back quietly and let peace return. If you have learned that distance can protect your peace, share your age in the comments. Tell me whether stepping back brought you guilt, loneliness, freedom, or perhaps a little of all three.